Everybody. Very warm welcome to another edition of our Across Retail Talk. My name is Reinhard Winiwarter. I'm the publisher of Across Magazine, and I'm very pleased that so many people across Europe are here today. I also think that our today's topic is a very exciting one. We will talk about retail parks and why they are so successful at the moment. As usual, we have a top class discussion group here. Klaus Striebich will also, as usual, lead this discussion as an expert moderator and as my master of ceremonies. I will be a very interested visitor of this discussion. And yes, and I would kindly invite you. You all can be part of this discussion by asking questions. And what we with the Cross Magazine would like to do is tomorrow we will publish a massive online special with over 80 pages of information dedicated to retail parks. And our discussion here will also be part of this online specials with a summary and a video. So that's it from my part at the beginning. And now hand over to Klaus Striebich. And Klaus, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Reinhard, and welcome back 2026 to our Across Retail Talks. And with the most important question, why are retail parks successful? Our job today is we will find out, and we have indeed some heavyweights from the retail park industry with us today. But first, the intro. So we are all from retail real estate industry, and we hear and we listen that the retail real estate industry is bouncing back. And there's maybe a reason why. My favorite question when it comes to a discussion about the future of retail is, and you all made already, where do we win and how do we play? And that's maybe one of the questions we could also raise when it comes to retail parks. That has to be figured out, and therefore this Across Retail Talk spots on retail parks, the origin, development, roles, strengths, opportunities, advantages and disadvantages, and the outlook for the future. Retail parks have been considered silent winners in brick-and-mortar retail for years, but why? Some provocative statements from my side. Retail parks are the new shopping center, but more efficient. Experience is overrated. Convenience wins. Yes or no? Investors still underestimate their potential. Let's get started and discuss, and I have the best round for that to discuss this. We have Anna Evans with us. Anna from Redevco, and it's the first time for you with in our retail talk. Hannah, welcome, and give us a hint of who you are and what you're doing with Redevco. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me. My name's Hannah Evans. I'm an investment director in Redevco's investment management team based in Amsterdam. Redevco is one of Europe's largest privately owned real estate management firms. We have a portfolio of around 10.5 billion AUM at the moment. You're probably familiar that we have a very long legacy in retail, not only across retail parks, but also across shopping centres and high streets. So it's interesting to see how the subsectors have interacted with each other and the performance over various market cycles we've been through. We've been invested in retail parks since 2001. So have around 25 years of experience in the subsector, and it continues to be of strategic importance for us, both for our family portfolio that we manage and the third-party clients that we represent as well. I'm responsible for a number of strategies and vehicles that we manage on behalf of third-party or external clients, one of which is focused on retail parks. And I think from my perspective, Redevco's strength in this area really lies in the deep local expertise that we have. We have around 250 colleagues across seven offices in Europe, which are really our boots on the ground, informing us of exactly what's happening with tenants, customers, and investors in the local market, that we can scale around a pan-European platform.
Cool, super happy anniversary for 25 years in retail parks investments. We keep the alphabetical order. We have Michael Hiese from Kaufland with us, also a heavyweight in the industry. Michael, welcome to our retail talks today.
Yeah, good afternoon to each and everyone listening. Thank you for having me. I'm Michael. I'm with Kaufland. I'm responsible for the real estate part of our operations, covering Germany and 7 countries in Central Eastern Europe. For the few of you who haven't heard about Kaufland yet, we are running grocery supermarkets, covering sizes from 2,000 to 13,000 square meters. We are operating around about 1,650 stores across the region. We are still expanding, and we like retail parks a lot. So that's the reason why we are here today discussing the topic.
Michael is always kidding. So if there's one in the room who has not heard from Kaufland after that session, it will be the last one. Roman, you also, for a very long time in the industry, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi and welcome everyone. I'm Roman Müller. I'm head of investment management retail at Union Investment. I'm responsible for the retail strategy as well as all acquisitions and sales of retail properties in Europe for Union Investment. We are one of the biggest investment and asset management companies in Europe. We are currently managing a portfolio of approximately 50 billion for more than a dozen of funds, and we cover all commercial asset classes. Of this 50 billion, nearly 8 billion is allocated to retail. And what sets us apart from some other retail investors is that we invest across different retail subsegments, from essential retail and retail parks, where we have a portfolio of approximately 1.5 billion currently, to high street locations, and also to market dominant shopping destinations such as Alexa in Berlin or Porto Venezia in Spain. Currently, we are active on both sides, which means sales as well as acquisitions. And in addition, we are actively sourcing third-party asset management mandates. For example, at the end of last year, we onboarded an essential retail and retail park portfolio worth nearly 500 million in Austria and Switzerland, which we are now managing for one of the largest German institutional investors.
Perfect. So welcome to all three. And there's a question from Reinhard. But you have raised your hands, but it's okay. Then if not, then we go ahead. So with these 3 guys in the room, I have a very, I would say, generic first question. If you can define a modern retail park in the European context, what are the structural differences from a retail park compared to shopping malls and high streets? And what is the major reason for you to invest in retail parks? Roman, would you love to start with?
Yes, I can do. So from my perspective, retail parks are really designed for today's, let's call it, time to consumers. They need to be easily accessible, efficient, and really convenient shopping. From my perspective, they are tailored to meet daily needs. From a retailer's perspective, what is quite appealing is that the total occupancy costs, so rent plus service charges, are typically by far lower than those on the high street or in shopping centers. And that enables, in particular, also discount-oriented formats, large format retailers, or low-margin businesses to achieve the necessary returns. From an investor's viewpoint, and that's where I'm coming from, retail parks really represent a relatively defense investment, delivering strong cash-on-cash returns. What is important for us is that the building layouts are highly efficient, that we minimize common areas, we are requiring limited capital expenditures, and in addition, normally the retail parks tenants are quite long in the properties, and the average lease duration is longer than on the high street or in shopping center. In summary, I would say what's really the key is the stability, that retail parks are driven by necessity, affordability, and accessibility. And that's the advantage for all three, for the customer, for the investor, as well as the retailer.
It sounds good, but a bit boring.
That's a good thing. It's boring.
Okay. Michael, if you allow, I would love to follow up with Hannah, the second biggest investor. What's your view on that? What is the biggest difference between retail parks, shopping centers, and high streets from your point of view when it comes to investments?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Roman said. So retail parks are all about convenience. That means being affordable, accessible, flexible also in terms of unit formats and shapes. So retailers can use them for uses beyond sales, like click and collect or last mile logistic nodes. But I think we shouldn't also forget about performance. When we look at the performance of retail subsectors, so retail parks versus high streets and shopping centres, retail parks really deliver an exceptional stability of returns, and especially a particularly high income returns compared to the more volatility that we see in high street and shopping centres. So I think from a investor perspective, it's really that institutional qualities that you can get from retail park investments that are attracting people to the space.
So stability is a kind of a value.
Stability is a value indeed, and that's driven, or the way we see it is we really focus on high proportion of non-discretionary retailers within your tenant mix, and that also sets the product apart from the tenants that you typically see in high streets or shopping centres, which are tend to be more focused towards the experience end of the spectrum. In retail parks, you have usually anchored by grocery, maybe DIY, some value retailers. So also the types of tenants are different, and that provides that stability of income.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Michael, if you hear that, that sounds good in your ears as a tenant, right?
Yes, indeed, and basically it's all true. So from our perspective, a retail park is a good combination with a grocery anchored store like Kaufland is. We like being enabled by specialized retailers such as DIY, electronics, fashion, shoes, and so on and so forth. So basically, a retail park is something that creates destinations that people like to go. And on the other hand, they are very convenient by design, but also by the fact that from a customer perspective, you don't need much time to get there because they're easily accessible. And they are designed in a way that the customer doesn't need to spend much time to doing their daily or weekly shopping. And this is probably one of the biggest differentiators in comparison to the shopping centers, where typically it takes you much longer to get there. They're a little bit more complicated. You have longer distances to walk from the parking to the shops. This is something what we don't see in retail parks, and that's why also from a customer perspective they are so attractive.
That means that fulfilling of needs is a priority, but what about desires and wishes? So, because there are some words in the industry, that means retail is more than just shopping or, let's say, filling up the basket. Grocery retail could be a social hub, or let's say riding in with a neighbor, seeing friends, sharing a coffee, arranging the next wine or whiskey tasting. Could that all take place in retail parks? And isn't that something that comes from the customer side and is requested? People say that shopping experience remains a very important part of our daily life next to fulfilling of needs. And that's precisely why grocery retail properties will continue to be in demand on the one hand. But how can you match that with all that requests and needs? Is that possible? Michael?
Well, that's the challenge for the developers as well as for us as the operators. And you're definitely right. I think that there are basically various expectations from the customer point of view. On the one hand, for your weekly shopping needs, you want to be as convenient and as quick as possible. Nobody wants to spend more time for shopping than absolutely necessary. On the other hand, there's also a desire to meet and to socialize, and this is something that we need to address, and also the developers need to address. And I think when it comes to shopping centers, they used to be a place to meet, and to be seen. And I think a retail park is rather a place to meet and to socialize and to spend time. And besides doing the necessity to shop for groceries or get a new pair of shoes, you also want to meet some friends or have a dinner with your family, but as convenient and as easy as possible.
Thanks, Hannah. Will you have an eye on that when you are investing in retail parks, that these kind of, let's say, socializing or let's say additional aspects are in? Is it a factor for you for the investment when it comes to a new offer?
Yeah, absolutely. We look at it very closely, both in our current portfolio, but also for new acquisitions, like you say. I think fundamentally, we still believe that the function of these parks is anchored in necessity, daily needs and convenience, as we've touched upon. But it's true that there are some complementary uses that we see working very well alongside those, particularly in the bigger parks. We see a little bit more healthcare coming in, for example. Some more F&B offers as well on our larger parks. I don't think it's going to become the primary use, but it is about the synergies that you can match alongside the convenience elements and the necessity retailers that you have there.
And Roman, your point of view?
Yeah, I agree with Hannah, but from my perspective, in retail parks still, to put it that way, form follows function. They are convenience schemes and they should be convenience schemes. Even though I really appreciate great architecture, I'm convinced that in retail parks, really we need the easy accessibility, the easy parking, the high convenience, really catering to meet daily needs. That's how retail parks should be structured. And a great experience is, from my perspective, an add-on, but not the primary focus of retail parks. And in my opinion, I also would not subscribe the thesis that the retail park is the better shopping center, because in some locations, shopping centers definitely perform better and can offer more experience. On the other hand, in a lot of locations, retail parks, with all the advantages that we've already described, are better suited for the catchment area and for the retailers.
Yeah, perfect. So most of you who are listening to that across talk see that my background has changed. So it's not my rare advice background. This time I have done something classical in the meantime, which is I asked my friend ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, please design and show me the best retail park in Europe. And that's the outcome. So that's the result, what has been shown, and it has started some, let's say, discussions amongst us. And I would love to use this opportunity to discuss this outcome from ChatGPT with reality somehow. And at a glance, ChatGPT said the ideal retail park size is, for example, 60 to 100,000 square meters in GLA, question mark. Typical unit size, something between 800 and 4,000 square meter may fit. The number of units is 20 to 40 different tenants. Parking space is 1,000 to 2,500. The catchment area 150 to 500,000 people, and the catchment in 10 to 20 minutes. All here on the left-hand side. Roman, when it comes to these kind of numbers, something very strange. Does it fit? How do you see that? If you see the layout and the shape, something you would love to invest in? What's your view on ChatGPT's outcome?
I wouldn't say I'm smarter than artificial intelligence, but definitely this would not match with our investment criteria. Starting from the size, and maybe some words about our general retail strategy. So we really see an ongoing polarization. And there are two poles which are benefiting from the polarization. On the one hand, it's convenience. On the other hand, it's experience. And in the experience segment, I'm quite convinced that really market dominant shopping centers or even great high street locations within metropolitan areas can offer more experience to the customers than maybe one or the other retail park. That's why we, from a union investment perspective, if we are looking into retail parks, we are always thinking about, the defense play that I mentioned, the boring one, how you described it. And this is, from my perspective, really a stronger focus on daily needs and some synergetic tenants, but not a 60 or 100,000 square meter scheme. In an ideal world, at least from a unit investment perspective, we love to acquire retail parks somewhere in between 10,000 to 20,000 square meters, maximum 25,000, something like that. Easy layout, all on ground floor. All the units with an own separate entrance from the parking, gathered around one central parking. Also, if I look at the picture, it really seems to be like there are some long walking distances for the customers if they park somewhere and want to go into another shop. So from my perspective, what AI has provided you there is not the best way forward.
Okay, maybe there's a more international view on that. So like the American guys who are driving
Yeah.
from box to box.
Could be.
But anyway, Hannah, a different view or aligned with Roman?
No, it's a very interesting, thought-provoking image to look at. But I think I agree. I'm sort of relieved that I don't fully agree with it, because I think that would signal that we could all be out of a job quite quickly. From my perspective, it's a bit too simple to take such a broad brush. I think from the way that Redevco looks at things, it's all about the relevance and the dominance in the local market of the retail park itself. So there may well be value in some of these bigger, larger retail park agglomerations, like you say, on the bigger side, serving wide catchment areas, maybe reaching across multiple towns or between cities. But also there's a very interesting play in more neighborhood focus schemes, smaller footprint, and really serving those daily needs to local residents. Again, the size of the catchment, what's really important, not just the size, but actually the evolution of that catchment. So are you in an area where you're expecting positive catchment growth, and of course avoiding areas where we foresee the population will be falling. So I think further detail is required to analyze the best retail park in the context of its own local market.
I have to admit that my prompt was a really small one, so therefore we have to excuse a little ChatGPT. And next time my prompt will increase, and therefore maybe the outcome is better. But we have to ask at least Michael, as the user, when it comes to an ideal, very good retail park, what's your view on that? Despite the fact that there is an investment view.
Well, we look at it definitely from the customer perspective. So convenience first, and what you described as boring is basically a no frills approach. So to say, have a good balance between convenience from a customer perspective, but also modern design and then convenient layout. So talking about layout, I also would agree with Roman. I don't like the positioning of the building, so that if people would have to walk very long distances. But I like the tenant mix. So basically everything you need is there, and a little bit behind your head is the supermarket. So the most important part of the entire development. I would argue also the size of the retail park. What we see today is rather a project with about 10 to 15 units, because also the retail park development and expansion is towards smaller cities and smaller catchment areas in the countries. What is still very important is visibility, accessibility, and sufficient parking. This is, I would argue, also something that we see in some of the developments from a developer's perspective. They rather put another box and one box more on the project, and thus not having enough parking. This is what we are very what we like to discuss very much with the developers, because if the customer can come by car and park easily, then that's an issue. And in terms of location, from the picture that I see no residential areas. I see only wood and trees. So this is something that we would definitely argue. So we want to be as close as possible to the customer. So I think we all know that a retail park is designed for the customer who's coming by car, and this will be true for the time being. But at the same time, we also like to have public transportation, and we also want to have at least a certain part of the customers to be able to come walking over bicycle.
Perfect. So you have now the opportunity, Michael, to choose the ideal neighbor, the ideal, I would say, tenant or a branch mix next to a Kaufland. What is your, I would say, ideal partner on this in this kind of retail parks, wherever it is?
If I have to choose one, I would choose the pharmacy.
Okay. And if you have the opportunity to choose 5 other ones, you mentioned, let's say, something around up to 10 additional components. What are the ideal, I would say, partners you would love to add on the site where you are the anchored store?
So basically, next to the supermarket, as I said, the pharmacy, food and beverage, fashion, shoes, drugstores, things like that. So basically, the something that covers the necessities of the customers, let's say, on a short-term basis. So we don't have like what we see there, furniture or DIY stores. Good to have them. They also create a frequency of their own, but the customer who is going grocery shopping is not necessarily going to the garden center to buy plants, things like that at the same time. So we would rather have the as I said, the short-term oriented tenant mix.
So the closer to the customer behavior, to daily needs, the better it is.
Yeah.
So the long-term goods like furniture or maybe DIY does not really fit. And it's always known that if you are going with your working dress into a supermarket, does not really fit, and vice versa. If you can choose the best mix from the investment part, Hannah, what will be the ideal combination? Maybe in UK or maybe in Netherlands or wherever you are buying, when it comes to branch and tenant mix from your point of view, what is the ideal mix for you?
Well, again, I think it has to be seen in terms of the context of the location and the catchment area it's serving. Also, of course, in terms of competition. But in general, we always look for it to be anchored by grocery or DIY, as we mentioned, and then the complementary uses, again, coming back to a high proportion of non-discretionary retailers. So as Michael was just mentioning, also pharmacies, health services, really those convenience services that are daily needs orientated, we like a lot. And then you have your complementary uses. I agree that I think actually the uses you see here are interesting. Garden stores, pet stores, toy stores, often homeware, they all work well in the retail park format. Typically, we like limited fashion exposure, but again, it can work in certain contexts, just depending on the location and the competition.
Anything to add, Roman?
I mean, one grocery anchor is great, 2 are even greater. No, I mean, because in some locations you have like more a supermarket chain and then a discount format in addition. I mean, in some country markets, it's also relatively specific. So, for example, if I'm thinking about Sweden, there you have the Systembolaget, the only shop where you can buy alcohol. If you have that shop within your scheme, it's a natural footfall driver. That's for sure. So it really depends on the location. From my perspective, you need a really significant share of fast-moving consumer goods, so groceries, drugstore, pharmacy, pets, and everything else. Every addition clearly depends on the location. And we as Union Investment, and I also personally, we are convinced of integrated locations. We don't really believe in out-of-town locations. So you need to be surrounded by residential. And yes, of course, retail parks are mainly car-driven destinations, but you also need to be accessible and reachable by foot or by public transport. It's just a minority share in some locations, but from our perspective, if you're really looking ahead, and we are normally investing for 10 to 15 years into one location, then we definitely want to be in more integrated schemes.
Super. I totally understand that when it comes to, let's say shorter distance to the customer, then it's maybe also a matter of what is the value of the site, of the ground. So therefore, we have to talk about efficiency of the development. So when it comes to project developments, and many people talk about that, is, let's say, how much levels could we achieve? If you talk about shopping centers or other, let's say, downtown locations, you can have a, let's say, multi-story building. Here we talk about one level, ideally. What about two levels? Because that raises the efficiency of the project development. Roman again, if there's an offer of a retail park where one or two parts are, let's say, double story, how would you react?
Cautious. No, I mean, the strong advantage is the easy layout. And sometimes you have like split levels or something. That's something we would look into. Also, if one or the other tenant within his own shop, has like a mezzanine floor or something like that, that's something we would look into. But if it's becoming too much of a shopping center hybrid, we don't really believe in those structures. Then we really believe we want to, on the one hand, have more retail park with daily needs and easy layout, or on the other hand, a really a shopping center in a great location with a high customer base, and that's in a different product and not like something in the middle, a hybrid scheme. That's not something for us.
And Hannah, could you consider a usage in a second floor on the roof to have a better efficiency on site? Because otherwise it would lead to the situation that the ground could be a bit more costly.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm afraid I'm going to be boring and agree with Roman. I think we'd also be very cautious about particularly a high proportion of space. There may be exceptional circumstances, as you say, where one or two units do have an upper floor or trade off two floors. Some tenants can make that work, but in general, we're very much in favor of the more simple one layer, single story formats, all accessible to a surface level car park.
And when there's other usage on the roof, maybe doctors, offices, residential,
That can make sense. But it's also really depending on the location. So we have some retail parks where we have, for example, like an office tower on top. So 3-4 stories, where in particular doctors and everything which has to do with like health and beauty is inside. We also love adding residential. On the other hand, it's sometimes quite tricky with delivery and opening hours and stuff with residential, so that's not that easy. We thought there's a bigger opportunity ahead of us than there sometimes is when you then really think about the details and how you can arrange it on site.
Let's ask the user that Kaufland how they see that. What about efficiency in usage of the site and let's say other users on your roof?
Well, I would agree with Hannah and Roman on a long perspective. Nothing beats an easy design, because operating a supermarket on 2 floors is definitely much more costly than having it on 1 floor, because you need travelators, you need elevators, you need to get the goods to the first floor and so on and so forth. From a customer perspective, distances are getting longer, so the grocery shopping takes longer. Also, construction costs are definitely higher to build 2 floors or more. It's also something that you have to consider. But if you have, let's say, third-party users like doctors, offices, gyms, things like that on the first floor, why not? That's definitely something that you could consider when it comes to retail and grocery retail in particular. We really like to have it on the ground floor and only 1 floor. There are some exceptions. We as Kaufland, we always say we are flexible, and indeed we are. We also have 2-story supermarkets, but then not in a typical retail park, but rather in a downtown location where it's simply not possible to put a large-scale supermarket on 1 floor. Then we would go on 2. But in a typical retail park, we would definitely prefer to have everything on 1 floor.
Yeah, if it would be all that easy, then there's no across retail talk needed any longer. So therefore, we are here to solve this more complicated thing. So thanks for that. By the way, in my neighborhood town, Michael, there is a nice Kaufland on 2 levels, and they manage it properly well. So fantastic. So that's the opportunity. I have a question when it comes to investment. So a question is, has the perception of retail parks in institutional portfolios somewhat changed? The question is, are retail parks today core plus, value add assets? If so, why? And if not, why not? What is your view, Hannah? How do you rate retail parks when it comes to investments? And has the risk return profile somewhat currently changed, or is it attractive compared to other asset classes? Lots of questions. Please try to answer one by one.
No, very interesting questions. So as I mentioned, retail parks have been a core part of our portfolio since 2001. So certainly our perception of them hasn't really changed. We really liked them back then. We continue to really like them. And that's really because we've seen the excellent performance that they've delivered for our clients with a high level of stability that we've already covered. We do see an increasing number of institutional investors looking at the space, which is very interesting. And I think that also comes from the evolution that's happened in retail investment world over the past 10 to 15 years. I think many institutional investors are now acknowledging that they could be slightly underweight in retail, having focused really heavily on other major sectors like residential or logistics in the past cycle. And as we've discussed, retail parks really offer probably the best institutional qualities within the retail space for those investors. So it's a particularly interesting time for the subsector. I think in terms of the risk return profile, of course, I think you can find core plus value add opportunities across the space, depending on where you're looking. And level of location, as we've discussed, location, catchment, maturity, level of dominance in the market. And Redevco's been active across the risk return spectrum. I think one angle that we haven't quite touched upon yet is also in the longer term, we see the strategic value of the land of these retail parks. So again, because of the time that we've been invested in the space, we've seen some retail parks that 20 years ago were really out of town have actually become much more edge of town locations as cities continue to grow and spread. And that inherently brings opportunity as well. As Roman just mentioned, in some cases, maybe there's more residential development opportunity or some opportunity to bring some other uses onto the land as well. It's certainly a longer term play and not applicable to every opportunity, but it is something that we've seen within our own portfolio that's an interesting angle.
Okay, so there is not a real differentiation between core plus value add. Roman, so value add investors are somewhat looking for or seeing opportunities, which is then less boring than we discussed beforehand. So something you would consider as well?
No. I mean, value add is always a definition, and it depends whether it's value add asset or value add location or both of it. But we as Union Investment, we are really a core and core plus investor. And our investments in the retail park segment are most of the time really in, in the neighborhoods or surrounded around metropolitan areas. So you don't really find us in more rural areas. We are looking for modern building standards, for simple single-story layouts, flexible floor plans. So we really want to have a modern retail park and not, just some random big boxes gathered in a rural area. And I think retail park-wise, as with all the other asset classes, there are also assets which will, in the long term, probably not perform. So we are still in a world of polarization. Retail parks are, in general, on average, the winners within the retail industry. But on the other hand, that doesn't apply to each and every location. And currently, I'm sometimes feeling that a lot of investors or asset managers that don't really have a good track record in retail or in retail parks. They tend to acquire retail parks because they think it's quite easy. Let's see how it all develops, because I think you have to differentiate between the different locations. You have to differentiate between the different assets, and you need the right expertise to form the right, to find the right opportunities that are promising also in the future. And regarding your question of the perception of retail parks, I think the perception of retail parks has dramatically improved over the last 10 years. But at least since COVID, more or less all institutional investors know the advantages and the strength of that segment. And everybody which is coming now to the market over the last 1 or 2 years, I think those are the guys not really having a clear strategy and trying to find easy narratives.
You're totally right. And it's also, I would say, swing back to our discussion about stability and resilience in that sector. Let's talk about obstacles and innovative solutions in the near future of retail parks. And there's a first question from the audience. Thanks for that. I will read it for you. So, given the growth of e-commerce, and of course we have to talk about e-commerce in addition, online ordering and further development of the logistics sector, do you see risk for retail parks in the future? Let's get started with Roman.
So in general, online and e-commerce remains a significant threat for retail, that's for sure, in particular also for the non-food segment. And I'm personally convinced that in the long term, all tenants, doesn't matter what assortment they offer, will only succeed if they really embrace omnichannel marketing and sales strategies. The advantage of retail parks is the relatively low rents and the relatively low service charge that enables retailers to also be profitable with a low margin business. And I think that low margin business sometimes has challenges when you try to sell stuff online with all the costs of logistics, etc., and so forth. So then the retail park is really the hub of the distribution that offers you an advantage. That said, also as said, I think there are some attempts of including last mile delivery, for example, in retail parks, but not a lot of them. I think this is really a strategic approach where we can all be a little bit better and more creative, how we can integrate that even in the shop or on the site. But I think it's more complementary to a retail park rather than a real threat. But on the other hand, in some more rural locations, as said, I still believe that we have too much retail space, and it doesn't matter if you're a shopping center or a retail park. If the catchment area is shrinking and you are not relevant anymore, then there's a downtrade, and in the end you lose the retailers towards online or towards or in general.
If it comes to robo taxis, drones, whatever delivery systems to make life more convenient than it is already, no bad feelings with retail parks?
In the rural areas, yes. In the city, I think we have to be 30 or 40 years ahead of time, that really you are as efficient with the delivery as you are with just buying your daily goods in store. That's at least my perspective, and I'm living in one of the most dense neighborhoods here in Hamburg, and I used a lot of food e-commerce retailers over the last years, but it was always more complicated than just walking 30 meters to the next supermarket and buying the stuff in store.
Anna, do you have this time another view, or do you agree again?
Sorry to disappoint, but I think it is this, as Roman mentioned, retail parks are particularly well suited for an omni-channel strategy from a retailer's perspective. So, occupiers really value the easy access, the parking, the logistics functionality or potential functionality, which traditional high streets or shopping centres do lack. I think it's interesting to look at the UK market as an example. That has one of the highest levels of online penetration when we look on a pan-European context. And there is a very healthy and well-performing retail park sector there that is embracing, as we've talked about, the complementary uses that can support their e-commerce, whether that's click and collect, whether that's the last mile logistics hubs into our retail parks.
I have to ask the food retailer now around, Michael. You have one of the biggest platforms, e-commerce platforms in-house. So therefore, are you scared about these technical developments or services?
No, we are not scared. We rather see it as an opportunity to grow and to grow into other segments and to have other ways how to get in contact with the customers. One thing is our retail platform, our Kaufland online store. The other one is our Kaufland app, which we use as a communication tool and to learn much more about the customer habits and their requirements. So there's definitely, where our threats, there are always opportunities. It's a way of how you see it, how you look at it. And I totally agree with Hannah and with Roman. I think brick and mortar retail is there to stay, especially when it comes to grocery. There are definitely certain assortments that are more, let's say, more threatened by online retail. But when it comes to fresh assortments like fruit, vegetables, meat, bakery goods, this is something that you need, let's say, every day, a couple of times a week. And there's nothing better than to come into a store and smell the fresh bread, or to get your favorite apple or fresh vegetables for lunch. This is something that online fortunately cannot offer. And on the other hand, you have to adjust your assortment and the way how you approach the customer. There's also ways like was already mentioned, to have click and collect services and things like that to make the purchase for the customer more convenient, even more convenient than it is today. And then there are still, I strongly believe there's still room for brick and mortar retail in the future.
Sounds that we will still live in both worlds of retail, means online and offline, which is good. So maybe the next question from the audience will fit perfect to the discussion. And the question is, thanks for this, what type of rental growth are you expecting in the retail park segment? Maybe we can again start with Michael. Maybe your view is different than the other ones. What's your...
Obviously. So I would be happy if we see stable rents. But well, it's hard to predict what we see over the last couple of years. We had a lot of, let's say, external factors. We had rising construction costs. We have the interest rate soaring. So this is definitely something that influences the calculation of new developments. On the other hand, we see a growing competition of locations and of retail parks, which also offers opportunities to make a bargain from our point of view in terms of rent. And so I would say it's rather a stable market growth on along the inflation rate all across the markets in the regions.
It sounds like a kind of an offer for the two, for Hannah and Roman. So the question was rental growth, not decrease. So therefore, Hannah, what's your view on that? I think you are a bit more positive in rental growth. And why?
We are indeed. I think we are positive in terms of rental growth for the sector. Of course, slightly differing views per country, but it's really driven by the resilient fundamentals that the retail parks offer. That's in terms of retail spending. We see very strong footfall and evolving footfall as well, and high occupancy, and that those ingredients of strong fundamentals all underpin our forecasts for rental growth.
And working on efficiency could lead to a higher increase than just the indexation or consumer price index. Maybe. Roman?
Yeah, I mean, the advantage of stability is also some kind of disadvantage, because from my perspective, you don't see a lot of rental growth. You see rental growth, but if it's in line with indexation, you're good. And if you really want to have more rental growth, then you need to work on the efficiency, in particular on the service charges, from my perspective, in in the retail park. Why is that? Because I mean, you have long-term contracts, you have very credit-worthy tenants, but on the other hand, indexation rules are sometimes not really investor-friendly, at least in some country markets, when you have a hurdle of 5 to 10%, and then it's kept at 60 or 70%. As said, this is not in all country markets, so there are still country markets where you see 100% of indexation in the retail park segment. And indeed, what Hannah said, if the neighborhood is growing, if the catchment area is growing, and then also the turnover potential is growing, and then you, at least at the end of the leases, you are able to have higher rents and to have a rental increase above indexation. But in general, from my perspective, it's a stable investment product with more or less stable rents, slightly upwards, but not like 4-5% every year. And that's then the wrong asset class.
It sounds also like an offer, Michael, right? Therefore, that the future business is somewhat secured. Are you fine with that?
Roman, excuse me, Roman, a good point. It's also about the overall cost, because if you have a good service charges and if you also include some ESG topics into your development, and then make sure that the operational costs are flexible, or let's say comparable to higher standards, then there's also room for higher rents. But in the end, from a retailer's perspective, we look at the total cost of ownership, and so the better the prices for the service charges, the higher the rent may be.
Sounds like that we have a lot of deals at the end of the show here. So that sounds all good. I would love to come to the next question. I'm dedicated to customers' views and customer behavior. And my question is, in general, has consumer behavior shifted sustainability in favor for retail parks? And that may fit to the question which came from the auditorium. It's a bit dedicated to Hannah. I read it, if you allow. Speaking of digital, Hannah, Redevco is a data-driven leader. As you move toward your data as a product strategy, do you plan to add a layer of granularity that proves how many people actually view the ads which are shown on site? Advertisers are no longer satisfied with paying for passers-by estimates. They now demand proof of real views. A very specific question, so sorry for that. But on the other hand, maybe an additional income stream which could be discussed when it comes to retail parks. What is Redevco's view on that? How do you use this, let's say data, or do you use data for an improvement of your income and rents?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, data is a key part of our strategy, and we're continuing to evolve on what we can collect and how we can best use it to inform better decisions. That's sometimes on ESG metrics, that's sometimes, as you mentioned, on maybe customer behavior, and understanding how the end customer is interacting with our park. And it can also be to the use of additional income streams, like you say, advertising, and things like that. In terms of how consumer behavior may have shifted for retail parks, I think they have always been a significant and popular part of the shopping culture. As Roman mentioned, COVID was an interesting part that I think gave them a little bit of an extra springboard into the retail landscape, and made people appreciate the convenience and accessibility of them. But as I mentioned, we've seen their strong performance for 25 years, so we do believe that they have always had an important part in the shopping landscape. I think finally, what's just important to note on this point is retail parks' flexibility allows them to also change with consumer behavior. So we've mentioned the omni-channel opportunities, but I think the format, accessibility, flexibility of the floor plates does allow both occupiers and investors to work together to shift when needed, when the consumer behavior shifts.
Thanks for that, Hannah. So as time is running, I have a very important questions for the maybe final round if you have time. So I would love to raise the question, what trends do you see shaping the future of retail parks? So if you can predict the future somewhat, what will you see? Roman, will you start with your predictions and outlook?
Yeah, two predictions or hopes. So I'm really excited to see whether and how, in particular, last mile logistics will be, really conceptually integrated into retail parks. On the one hand, within the shops, or on the other hand, within the retail park in general. As of now, there are some attempts, but really a broader strategy I haven't found yet. But I think because you have to combine with omnichannel, you need to have a fully digitalized supply chain. I think there is room of improvement. So this is really a development I'm excited to see. And the second thing is really, in particular, about the technical sustainability, because retail parks or retail in general is quite an energy intense business. And we as Union Investment, we really believe, and we have the goal of being net zero at some point in the future. And this is only possible if we are really able to create the energy that we need on site, and to be really efficient within the scheme. Maybe also to focus more on different building constructions, materials like wood. For example, a German company called Ratisbona is working a lot with that, or applying cradle-to-cradle strategies. So really trying to be more progressive when it comes to how to construct the retail park, what materials you use, and how to be more energy efficient. And this is far beyond of just adding solar panels, because in some other or in some older schemes you can't even add solar panels because you don't have the load bearing. That's really, from my perspective, the most important topic for the future.
Very interesting. Thanks for that, Roman. Michael, I would love to move to the side of the retailer and the user. What is your view on how to shape the future of retail parks? What do you see?
I would agree that applying green standards into the construction and the development of retail parks is a crucial factor for success in the future. I believe that we will see much more things like health and food and beverages on retail parks as well, to extend the time that the customers are basically spending on the retail parks, and applying everything under one roof approach, so to say, even though there is no roof, but everything on one space. And I think the third thing is retail parks as itself, and the developers and the operators have to be much more flexible, or have to keep as flexible as possible to address changing customer expectations.
Thanks. And Hannah, please, your future outlook, and maybe to start with the last round, your 3 recommendations for all of us, for the industry, how to make the future bright and positive.
In just 2 minutes, I'll try and keep it brief. So I think from a product perspective, it's keeping customer centric. So being very clear on what we're offering to the end customer and why we're offering it. Again, in retail parks case, that's really about the convenience, the accessibility, the affordability of the format. Secondly, I'd say tenant engagement and partnership between the tenants and the investors is really key. We've seen some great results when we can join forces with tenants and collaborate to achieve joint goals, whether that's improving operational efficiency, whether it's on sustainability. I think that will remain a core pillar to a successful retail management strategy. And finally, an eye to the future. So again, making sure that your product is relevant and future-proof, whether that's by maintaining flexibility, whether that's by changing and adapting to customer needs when you see that happening. So I think always having an eye to the future is important as well.
I love remain relevant. So thanks for that, Hannah. Roman, you have also 3 recommendations for the industry, how to cope the future.
Yeah, I think all of it has to do with being able to adapt to really a steadily changing environment and constantly changing of the consumer behavior. My first recommendation would be definitely form your own opinion. Don't just blindly follow narratives and differentiate between locations. That's really the most important topic for me. The second thing is what also Hannah mentioned, choose the right partners and build trustworthy long-term relationships, in particular with the retailers, so landlord and retailer. It only works if both are happy at site. And the last one would be, from my perspective, I mean, as the polarization of retail is ongoing since years, you can clearly see what are the winning and what are the losing concepts. But never be too sure. Even if you're currently a winner, please continue investing to remain a best-in-class asset. I think being able to adapt is really the key for performing well in retail. Doesn't matter if it's retail park or another sub asset class.
Great commendation, Roman. And Michael, it's on your side to have the last words. I think you may agree or want to add something.
I definitely agree. Customer orientation is key because in the end, the customer decides whether the scheme will be successful or not. Collaboration, we have to overcome the stereotypes of being a landlord or being an operator or a tenant. To make it successful, we have to collaborate, and we are both. It takes both sides to make a retail park successful. And in the end, maybe it's something that we could learn from the shopping center industry. You have to keep investing also in existing retail parks. Because they are not just built once and then they are only generating revenues. You also have to keep them modern, on track, and adapted to changing customer behaviors.
Best final words I could do so, therefore, and it's absolutely in time. That was a fantastic round.
Yep.
Thanks to Hannah, Michael, and Roman for this absolute expert discussion. Much appreciated. I hope we can have good outcomes and key takeaways from that. And I give back to Reinhard for the last words and what's coming next.
Cool. Yeah, many thanks. What should I say? Thank you very much. It was a high caliber round, so it was really good, and it was inspiring. It was exciting and very informative. And what you did, definitely, you provided us so many valuable ideas for our future editorial work. So thank you very much. As mentioned at the beginning, we would like to, let's say, to produce a really massive online special dedicated to retail parks tomorrow. This discussion, this panel here will also be part of this online special. We will send it out tomorrow with a video and also with a summary of this discussion. And I'm looking forward to this really nice piece of information we would like to, or we can create. Thanks again for the panelists. Thanks again for so many people watching us. What I really do hope is that maybe you would like to join us in our next retail talk, which will take place on the 10th of June. And we will talk about investment strategies in retail real estate. And I think we will also have a high caliber round with, for example, Rice Evans from Padera, Steffen Hoffmann von Ambers, and Henry Eisenkopf von Union Investment. And I'm looking forward to this next retail talk on the 10th of June. So thank you very much. That's it. Greetings from Vienna. Wish you a great day, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Always see you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
See you.